we will learn about the concept of independent events. Basically, in probability theory, the concept of independence is different from concept of disjoint set. So, the independence between two events means that joint probability is equal to the product of probability, that is probability of A B, or probability of A intersection B is equal to probability of A times probability of B. So, going back to the experiment 1 in our previous videos, that is basically toss a coin twice and note the faces. So from this experiment, which has 4 possible outcomes, let us define two events, A and B. So A can be defined as heads on first toss and B as tails on second toss. So for A, the possible outcomes are heads and heads, heads and tails. So the probability of A is obviously 1 by 2. The event B is defined as tails on the second toss. That is, event B has 2 possible outcomes, heads and tails, tails and tails. So the probability of this event is 1 by 2. Now there is an intersection between these two events, that is A intersection B is equal to the outcome heads and tails. So the probability of this intersection event or intersection set is 1 by 4. We can clearly see that the joint probability P of AB or P of A intersection B is equal to product of the individual probabilities. From the definitions also we can clearly see that these two events are independent, since the outcome on the first toss is always going to be independent of the outcome of the second toss. So the definitions also make it clear that events A and B are independent, but that does not mean that they do not have an intersection, because we can clearly see that the events A and B have an intersection, that is the outcome heads and tails. Now we can look at the difference between concept of independence and the concept of disjoint sets. That is, we can actually define under two events A and B which are disjoint from each other. That is, they do not have anything in common. Then their joint probability is equal to 0. So we can clearly see from the definitions. Let us define two new events A and B. A is equal to event in which we have both tosses have same face, that is the outcomes are heads and heads, tails and tails. And then we have another event B which has basically different faces in the two tosses, that is the possible outcomes are heads and tails and heads. So we can clearly see that the event A and event B do not have anything in common, that is their intersection is an empty set. So the joint probability P of AB is equal to 0. So you see that if two events are independent, that does not mean that they are disjoint, and if two events are disjoint, then the concept of independence has no meaning. That is, probability of A intersection B is already 0.